This is how nurses are living on just $500 a week, while their colleagues spend their entire paychecks. These aggressive savers are banking 57 to 70% of their income, building wealth that most people think is impossible on a nursing salary. Let me be clear about what we're talking about here. $500 a week. That's $2,166 per month, or $26,000 per year. The median RN salary sits at $86,070, which means this budget represents just 30% of gross income. Most financial experts say living on 50% of your income is aggressive, but these nurses are taking it to another level entirely. You might think this sounds impossible, and I get it. The national average for a single person's monthly expenses hits $3,693. Housing alone typically runs $1,784. Transportation adds another $813. Food costs $407. Healthcare runs $477. And that's before we even talk about student loans, which average between $40,000 and $47,000 for nurses. So how are some nurses making this work? The answer isn't deprivation, it's strategy. And the first strategy happens to be the most powerful one: housing. Traditional financial advice tells you to spend no more than 30% of your income on housing. On a $500 weekly budget, that's $150. In most cities, that won't even get you a cardboard box, but here's what these budget-conscious nurses figured out. They're not living alone. They find other healthcare workers and create shared living situations. 3 nurses split a 2-bedroom apartment. 4 healthcare workers rent a house together. Some get even more creative. One nurse I researched rents a room from an elderly couple in exchange for checking on them daily and helping with medications. She pays $400 a month instead of $1,200. Think about your own situation for a second. Your hospital probably has dozens, maybe hundreds of nurses all facing the same housing costs. Yet how many of you are living alone, paying full rent when you could be splitting expenses? The math couldn't be simpler. An $1,800 apartment split 3 ways comes out to $600 each. That's $150 per week, right on target. Housing is just the beginning, though. Let's talk about the second biggest expense: transportation. The average American spends $813 monthly on getting around. That's over $200 per week, which would blow up our entire budget. So what's the solution? These budget-savvy nurses discovered something interesting. Many hospitals offer benefits that most staff never touch. Free parking worth $50 to $200 per month. Subsidized public transit passes. Some facilities even run shuttle services from major transit hubs. One nurse told me she sold her car, uses the hospital shuttle, and walks or bikes for everything else. She went from spending $600 a month on car payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance to spending $50 on an occasional Uber. I know what you're thinking. What about those 12-hour shifts? What about getting home at midnight after a brutal day? This is where planning becomes critical. These nurses arrange their schedules to carpool with colleagues. They live close enough to bike on good weather days. They use those night shift differentials, which add 10 to 20% to base pay, to justify the occasional rideshare splurge. Food is where most budgets die. The average person drops $407 monthly on food. But think about your actual eating patterns as a nurse. You're at the hospital for 12 to 13 hours on work days. That's 2 meals, sometimes 3. And here's what many nurses miss: your hospital cafeteria probably offers employee discounts. We're talking $3 to $5 meals instead of 12 to 15 in the outside world. The nurses crushing this budget have meal prep down to a science. Sunday afternoon, they're preparing meals for their 3 or 4 shifts that week. Rice, beans, chicken, vegetables bought in bulk, cooked in batches, portioned into containers. They're spending $60 to $80 per week on groceries that would cost others $150 or more. And they're not eating rice and beans every meal. They create variety through spices, sauces, and seasonal vegetables. One strategy I found fascinating involves group buying. 4 or 5 nurses go in together on a Costco membership. They split bulk purchases of non-perishables. 20 pounds of rice divided 5 ways. Cases of canned goods distributed among the group. The savings are significant, often 30 to 40% below regular grocery store prices. Let's break down the actual weekly budget. Fixed expenses come to about $300 per week. Rent with roommates runs $150 to $175. Utilities and internet split among housemates costs $25 to $30. Transportation, whether it's a bus pass or occasional ride shares, takes $50 to $75. Insurance and phone eat up another $50 to $75. That leaves $200 for everything else. Variable expenses take up about $150 of that remaining $200. Groceries and meal prep cost $60 to $80. Personal care items run $20 to $30. Entertainment and miscellaneous spending takes $20 to $30. Emergency fund contributions add $30 to $40. This leaves $50 per week minimum for additional savings and investments. But here's where it gets interesting. These nurses aren't just surviving on $500 a week, they're thriving. They use strategies most people never consider. They take advantage of every employee benefit: free gym at the hospital, continuing education reimbursements, prescription discount programs, wellness programs that offer cash incentives. Some hospitals even offer free counseling services, which could otherwise cost hundreds per month. The controversial part: their colleagues think they're crazy. There's real peer pressure in nursing to spend money, to have the nice car in the parking garage, to go out for drinks after a rough shift, to take expensive vacations to decompress from the stress. And yes, nursing is stressful, and yes, self-care matters. But these budget-conscious nurses figured out something important. Self-care doesn't require spending money. A walk in the park costs nothing. A library book is free. Cooking a nice meal at home can be more relaxing than fighting restaurant crowds. They find fulfillment in watching their bank accounts grow rather than accumulating stuff. The timeline for implementing this budget is crucial. You can't just slash your expenses overnight. Week 1 and 2, track everything, every coffee, every purchase, every automated payment. Week 3 and 4, identify what can be cut. Month 2 is when you make the big moves: finding roommates, selling the car if possible, setting up meal prep routines. Month 3, you optimize. You find the cheapest grocery stores, perfect your meal prep, establish your new routines. By month 6, it's automatic. But why would anyone want to live like this? Because the math is staggering. Save $350 per week, and that's $18,200 per year. Invested at historical market returns, that becomes $36,000 in 5 years. In 10 years, you're looking at $118,000. In 20 years, over $500,000. And that's assuming you never get a raise, never increase your savings rate, never pick up an extra shift. The reality gets even better. Nurses working this budget often pick up 1 or 2 extra shifts per month. That overtime pay, at time-and-a-half rates, goes straight to savings. A single extra shift might bring in $600 to $800. Do that twice a month and you've doubled your savings rate without touching your budget. There's also the psychological benefit. When you're living on 30% of your income, you have options. Hate your manager. You can afford to switch jobs. Burned out. You can take a sabbatical. Want to travel. You've got the funds. Want to go back to school. You're not living paycheck to paycheck. The 2024 economic context actually makes this easier than before. High-yield savings accounts are paying 4 to 5% interest. That's free money on your emergency fund. Inflation has stabilized at 2.4 to 3.2%, down from the spikes of recent years. Rent increases have slowed to 3 to 5% annually. The nursing shortage drives wages up faster than expenses. Some nurses take this even further. They use travel nursing assignments to supercharge their savings. Yes, travel nursing has higher expenses, but the pay differential often more than compensates. They use apps like ShiftMed and CareRev to pick up gig shifts at premium rates. They live in lower-cost areas while working telehealth shifts for hospitals in expensive cities. Critics of extreme budgeting have valid points. What about quality of life? What about enjoying your youth? What about the emotional toll of nursing requiring some indulgent spending? These are real concerns, but the nurses making this work have found balance. They're not depriving themselves, they're being intentional. They choose experiences over things. They find joy in simplicity. They also protect themselves against burnout in a different way. Financial stress contributes massively to nurse burnout. 68% of nurses report financial stress despite good salaries. When you're living on 30% of your income, that stress disappears. You're not worried about making rent. You're not anxious about an unexpected car repair. You have margins. You have options. You have peace. Implementation isn't always smooth. Long shifts make meal prep challenging. Some weeks you're too exhausted to cook. That's why the budget includes flexibility. That 20 to 30 for miscellaneous spending. Sometimes it's a pizza on a particularly brutal week. The key is making it the exception, not the rule. Geographic arbitrage becomes another strategy these nurses use. They work in high-paying areas but live in lower-cost neighborhoods. They commute a bit further but save hundreds on rent. Some even live across state lines, taking advantage of tax differences while working in expensive medical centers. The community aspect is crucial. These nurses find each other. They share recipes, transportation, bulk buying opportunities. They hold each other accountable. They celebrate milestones together. Saving aggressively doesn't mean being alone. Often, it means finding your tribe of like-minded people who understand that financial independence is worth temporary sacrifice. So where does this leave you? You're making good money as a nurse. The median RN salary of $86,070 puts you well above the national average. But if you're like most nurses, you're spending most or all of it. You're stressed about money despite earning more than many of your friends. You wonder how some colleagues seem so relaxed about finances while you're living paycheck to paycheck. The difference isn't their income, it's their choices. Every nurse listening to this has the potential to live on $500 per week. Not because they have to, but because they choose to. Because they understand that money is just a tool, and the less you need, the more powerful that tool becomes. Start small. You don't need to immediately slash your budget to $500 per week. Try $700 first, then $600. See what's possible, track your spending, find roommates, meal prep for just 1 week. Use the hospital cafeteria, take the shuttle. Each small change adds up. Remember, this isn't about deprivation, it's about intention. It's about building the life you want, not the life advertising tells you to want. It's about having options, reducing stress, and creating security in an uncertain world. It's about recognizing that as a nurse, you have skills that will always be in demand, income that's above average, and the opportunity to build real wealth if you're willing to be different. The nurses living on $500 per week aren't special. They're not superhuman. They're just clear about their priorities. They've decided that financial independence matters more than keeping up with appearances. They've chosen future freedom over current consumption. And every week, as they bank 70% of their income, they're buying their future one saved dollar at a time.